And in sort of talking about who we might have as a guest speaker, I talked to a number of people, and the name Jase Watford kept coming up, and I'm thinking, who is this guy anyway? So we brought him in and had a great time talking about his life story, and I thought it would be a really good opportunity for everyone to hear his story today. So it gives me great pleasure to introduce Jase. He calls himself just an ordinary guy living an extraordinary life. As a survivor of childhood sexual abuse, he was born to multi-generational trauma and childhood sexual abuse, and he was born to multi-generational trauma and poverty. Not finishing grade 10 and kicked out at 16, he persevered through homelessness, mental illness, and substance abuse issues. Not only has Jase survived, but thrived, and even though his journey is not close to being over, he has found out that even in total darkness, there is light. Welcome, Jase.
Thanks, Marie. It's such an honor to be here. Can I get a motion for me to be here? Seconded? Perfect. So good evening, everybody. Thanks for coming and sticking around. In case you haven't found the free stuff, it's located there, and there. Just make sure you save me a little something for when I'm done, because I'd like some. I actually brought some Tupperware for the event. No, I really brought some Tupperware for the event. Hey, man, you know, some things when you've lived homeless and you've been on the system for as long as I have, you cherish free food. Free and food are my favorite F words. I kid though, you know, I don't plan on using my Tupperware for now. But to introduce myself, my name's Jase Watford, and I'm going to tell you a little bit about how I came to find myself on the podium here tonight. I won't get too detailed into my past, because even though I've experienced a lot, I believe that everyone on this planet experiences and goes through a lot as well. Experience is relative. So you may or may not know what it is like to have gone through the same things I have, but the feelings that everyone experiences are the true connecting rod. Grief, loss, love, hate, anger, joy. We all have the capacity to experience, but it's connecting to our feelings that I feel is the most valuable in validating an individual and helping them through a dark time. It's why I think that empathy is very important in the society that we live in. Now, to become homeless, a number of circumstances must be present usually. Homelessness seldom happens overnight. So with my story, hopefully you'll see how it happened to me and what I did to overcome the obstacles that were in front of me. I was born in Toronto to an abusive home of lower socioeconomic status. My father had schizophrenia. My mother had complex PTSD. So from an early age, my brother and I experienced all forms of abuse: physical, psychological, sexual, emotional. It's interesting how cycles work. My mother and my father, they took things out on my brother and I. And we took it out on each other. But what they took out on us was taken out on them previously. So I was born into intergenerational trauma and poverty, a violent French family with a litany of faults. Mental illness and addiction, or concurrent disorders, was rampant. So in my case, I wasn't necessarily genetically predisposed per se, but environmentally, I learned all the danger and unhealthiness from my family, which complicated and compounded the mental illness that I incurred later in life. I was an angry kid who was dirt poor, with a dad and a mom who had serious issues. They culminated into my father committing suicide when I was 12, the day before my mother's birthday. Happy birthday, Mom. That made me angrier. As much as things were messed up, I loved my dad. He was my hero. He was everything I wanted to be, as messed up as he was. My dad died, my mom hated my dad, and I reminded her of him. It got worse. She was overwhelmed and could not handle two angry teens beginning to rebel. But she had a special hatred for me, it seemed. My mother is codependent, and to fill that void, she filled it with men, a rotating door, all of which was not my dad. To combat my unsettled anger, she brought in a big brother to try and deflect the focus. Unfortunately, the big brother was a sexual predator. He groomed me, and he tried it with my brother. My brother was wise, younger than me, but he was wise, and he told my mom about it. But for some reason, she continued to send me out with him, but not my brother. But you know what, though? To be honest with you, I didn't mind. I developed Stockholm Syndrome. So for those of you that don't know what that is, that's where those that get abused develop warm and fuzzy feelings and love for those that are abusing. He loved me. He spent time with me. So I looked past what he wanted to do to me. He treated me better than anyone had at that point. And thankfully, a lot of that past time period has been blacked out. I don't know how I stopped seeing him, to be honest. But anyone that knows anything about trauma, blacking out's not the greatest sign. I have to take medication to go to sleep at night because my night terrors are so strong. My aberrant behavior makes high school an equal nightmare. My mom throws me out at 16, I don't finish grade 10, and I couch surf until I'm 18. I developed trauma and hypervigilance towards people. Everything became some kind of a threat assessment. It made elementary school impossible because I hid in all the corners. Leaving Toronto at 18, I moved to Alberta, and somehow my anger became suppressed, which turned me into a sociopath. I crippled and corrupted everything that I could. I had no remorse, for behind my charming smile was a furious anger, which I hid in my career-based motivation. In my goal to put myself first, I learned how to manipulate and get whatever I wanted. It paid off. Career-wise, for a while, I worked for clubs. I worked on the radio for a couple of years, having my own show. And then I moved to Vancouver, where I could take it to new heights, and I ultimately went to sea. It's hyperbole and cliche, but wherever you go, there you are. You can't keep a cork on a bottle that is destined to pop. So going to sea helped me run, and I became a victim of my own success. By hiding in my work, I started as a DJ, and I finished as a senior assistant cruise director, where my mental health popped, and I exploded into my first full-blown mania. That's right, an onset of bipolar. Looking back, I can see evidence of it, but this was the first time it happened in a non-chaotic environment, so it was very noticeable. This begins my official homeless journey. Even though I couch surfed for a while, and that's classified as hidden homelessness, for me, it wasn't until I hit the street where I really realized just how severe my situation was. So I landed back in Vancouver in the middle of a mania. I was lost. I was confused. I had no money, no friends, no family. So I checked myself and my 2 bags of clothes into a homeless shelter. The shelters in Vancouver are overcrowded and time sensitive. So 2 weeks was the max that I could stay. And because I haven't been in Canada for 8 years, I couldn't get any immediate support. There's no welfare. There's no doctor, not until I've been a resident in the province for 3 months. So I was not well mentally, and technically, I was out of options. If my mental state was better, I could have found alternatives, but the mania that was thriving inside of me figured it was a great idea to go live amongst the locals. I bought a tent, and I joined the homeless tent town on East Hastings, Vancouver. My mental health eroded at a furious rate, and 3 months turned to 6. I turned to substances to manage because nobody honestly wakes up, unzips their tent flap in the Lower East Side and says, "Hey, what a great morning to be alive." It just doesn't happen. It became a hustle just to survive. And in today's world, people don't really want to hear the truth when I talk to them about my life. And that truth is that this man before you has been severely abused. He is mentally ill. He deals with addiction issues, and he's lived on the streets. That same man, while on the street, was ignored, spit on, shamed by the passers-by. And when that man went seeking help, he was constantly told that he was hopeless, and he was refused service by the professionals whom he asked for help. Homelessness, addiction, mental health, food insecurity, it's all intermingled. I'm not telling you guys anything that you don't already know, but it is that stress of being homeless. That is the invisible killer. That stress makes life so much more difficult. Dr. Gabor Mate in some of his interviews has been quoted as saying that we are in a punitive system, one that is built to add volumes of stress on people who are already stressed. Now, I live with 5 mental illnesses, and at times it makes life tough, especially when it comes to who's in charge at breakfast. The bipolar side, my mania is like, oh, cereal, toast, cereal, toast, cereal, toast. But the depressive side's like, forget it, man, I'm staying in bed. I don't want to be here. My ADHD is like, cereal, toast, squirrel, 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 squirrel. The OCD in me is like, go with the toast. Definitely go with the toast. The milk and the cereal, there's too much going on. And if we're going to cook the toast, it has to be exactly light brown, and it has to be to the exact perfection, and you've got to pop the toaster just before it pops. Because if you don't, then we're going to have to do this again. And did I remember to plug in the toaster? The PTSD in me just can't handle breakfast. It freaks out every time the toaster pops. Doesn't want to be there. And then finally, the substance abuse disorder in me is like, it's 5 o'clock somewhere. Forget this dry crap. Let's go to the strip bar. Let's get it on. That is how breakfast goes at my house. It's complicated and it is challenging because mental illness has played such a huge part of me being homeless. It essentially forged a brand new identity, one that was not me. When I tell someone about any of my diagnoses, they understand it from their perspective. So what bipolar looks like to them, or what ADHD looks like to them, it isn't accurate. Nor is it something I want to be known by. Sometimes we have more names on us that we forget our own. Who am I? What am I to you? Is what you see or think what I truly am? Our world is built on these sort of premises. It is why I don't identify if I don't have to. Granted, who I am and what I do, I put it out there. It's because I challenge and I dare people to judge or assume that I am this or I am that. I know my intrinsic worth now. I know my skill set, and part of who I am is to bring awareness to others. It is my goal to change the lens to which homeless and mentally ill people are viewed. Can you imagine your livelihood, your life, on the line each and every single day? It goes from a regular person's month-to-month existence to a second-by-second existence. Homeless individuals will always sacrifice the future to make the present more manageable. So after the first year in Vancouver, I left for Nanaimo. Fortunate for me, my substance abuse was noticeable enough that after 6 months of rotating between Park Bench and Salvation Army, I was accepted into treatment. It was getting to the point of no return because I needed consistent shelter. 3 hots and a cot, or 3 meals and a bed for those of you that don't speak street. Now I'll take that every day of the week, which is why I was even considering robbing a liquor store. Prison had to be better than the street. It was dry, it had food, and the way I saw it, the same animals are in prison that are on the street. But sometimes the worst prison to be in is the one that you're carrying with you. I completed the treatment program, I got out. I failed at life again because I had no follow-up support. But I learned that treatment will take me again. So I went back to treatment. Got out, and I failed again. Now treatment helped me to a point. I became less feral, less crazy. Enough to know that I needed to fight for a change. If no one was going to help me, I had to help myself. I took up a local agency's offer of a bus ticket out of province. I did some research. And that's the sketchy homeless guy version of research, which is a little less than the research people do before they repost things on Facebook. I chose Kenora. Like I said, I was less crazy. I'm not really sure why I chose Kenora. But you can call it a fortuitous bounce because I couldn't stay away from substances, right? Everywhere you go, there you are. So I landed in detox, which led to Dillard Manor, which is a halfway house in the remote woods of Keewatin. And then Dillard Manor led to Sister Margaret Smith Center here in Thunder Bay. It's hard. So that's where things changed. So when I'm at the Smith, for the first time I was treated for my mental health, which addressed my poor coping skills. So I went from the Smith to 3C's post-treatment halfway house to Seaway Apartments, which is an observed, sober apartment with other individuals learning to deal with difficulties. But see, now for me, though, I'm stuck in that recovery narrative, as it was the only avenue I could use to help get me off the street. And going to Narcotics Anonymous does very little for combating untreated mental illness, and in many cases, it makes matters worse. At that point, I'm still living out of black garbage bags. I wanted to work, to get off Ontario Works, and to make some money. But it's very difficult to secure meaningful employment when your address and your telephone number are that of an institution. And in Thunder Bay, I swear, it's like the landlords intentionally set the bar too high with the rent, intentionally avoiding my kind. Subsidized housing is what? A 2 to 3 year wait if you're single? I could probably make a child and then get into family assisted living faster than if I was single. Anyone want to make a child? No? I'm house trained, swear. So from Seaway, I was placed into Alpha Court Housing, which I've been there for 2 years. Now, I was interviewed by the Globe and Mail last month, where the interviewer argued with me when I told her that I don't have a home. She believed that where I live automatically is a home. And we went back and forth for about 15, 20 minutes about this. So I gave her a metaphor. A man goes to jail for life. He will stay in the same cell till he dies. No matter how much he decorates or dresses it up, that is not his home. Now, I'm not comparing my apartment to a jail cell, but I am placed here, and I cannot leave it. I cannot afford to go anywhere else. It is not mine. I have not earned it, and in many ways, it feels like a prison. Because if I had the choice, I would leave, and I would go somewhere else. What I have is provided shelter, and I am extremely grateful for it, because I could be on the street otherwise. But I desire more. I want more. And for me to get more, I know that I need to do a lot more work. So the key for me is expanding my awareness. I don't have eureka moments. You know, eureka meaning I found it. Instead I have, that's funny. Because I'm often surprised as to what I've uncovered. Humans didn't create fire. It existed long before they did. But humans learned how to harness it. I don't know what I'm looking for because it existed before I did. Instead, when I search, I end up surprised, and that surprise means I'm breaking a perceived idea. Because that idea was formed after a truth, not on or of a truth. Because of my past, I have a lot of ideas that need breaking. So in a sense, I am seeking a real truth about me, about my life, and about the world that I live in. Being aware enough to look at things, analyze it, and notice that something is off, I always look further. I don't know what I'm looking for. And if I do know what I'm looking for, it is there where the idea gets broken, and I'm like, well, what do you know? That's funny. Instead of eureka, right? So I've just finished my 3rd year at post-secondary. I was in the social service worker program at Confederation College, and now I'm at Lakehead University. I'm working towards 2 degrees, a Bachelor in Philosophy and my Honors Bachelor in Social Work. I carry an 85% grade average across all 3 years. I've volunteered with 9 agencies in the last year, on top of working at the Salvation Army, where I've created some programming, and I've helped advocate for those who struggle with the same issues I have. Now, I won't be leaving school until both my master's and my PhD is complete in social work and then education. Now, that sounds like some really lofty goals from a guy who, with my background, came off the street, but the way I see it, if Donald Trump can become president, then a homeless guy can get his PhD. Now, unfortunately, not only am I still in the system, having to use food banks, collect handouts from government, but due to a tiny error in filling out my OSAP form last year, and I mean tiny, $180 discrepancy, the government believes that I am intentionally defrauding them, and they banned me for 5 years from getting any further funding from them. Ouch, right? You talk about spirit crushing? That hurts more than missing out on the second showcase on The Price is Right. It was a hard hit, and definitely the hardest hit I've taken since getting off the street. But the thing is, though, I turned into it. In the movie Red October, which is a submarine movie, the sub Red October is being chased and gets shot at with a torpedo. The captain of the Red October does the unthinkable and turns into the path and heads towards the torpedo. The Red October hits the torpedo head on, disarming it because it took time for the torpedo to load, thus beating it. Now, the moral of that story is that you can run, but that torpedo is going to gain momentum. It's going to get stronger and stronger, and it's eventually going to catch you. So I turn into my problems now. I face them, and I don't give them space to gain that momentum. It makes it easier for me to deal with, and it also lowers the amount of stress that I'm going through. So after roughly 15 years of homelessness, I'm not going back. You can't stop me. The government's not going to stop me. Alter my path? Sure. But I'm still going to get where I'm meant to go. I only lose my power when I give it away to someone else. And nobody can take that from me. It is a quiet confidence, and some days are better than others. Did I cry over the school thing? You bet I did. I needed to grieve. I needed to process. I needed to regroup. I needed to dig in. All these skills that I've learned since coming off the street, and especially what I've learned here in Thunder Bay. I owe Thunder Bay a tremendous amount of gratitude because this city gave me a belief in myself. It gave me a purpose to work towards. I don't need school to define me. Being a social worker and a philosopher, that's not my identity. And this setback helps me remember what is authentic. Who is Jase? I am a seeker. I seek experience. I seek knowledge with hopes to form it into wisdom. But I always seem to forget that I've acquired wisdom already. I have one foot always in the future, and I think with school I had 2 feet in the future. So when I volunteer or I casually take shifts at the Salvation Army, I remember why I wanted to go to school and who I am. I am home, always on the front lines. You can take the kid off the street, but you can't take the street out of the kid. I'm malleable, I remain teachable, and it helps me stay humble. It helps me shed my defenses, because I wear a very hard exterior sometimes. It can be difficult for me to be vulnerable. Last month I went to the Home and Garden show so I could buy a cactus, which is like my spirit animal or my spirit plant, because a cactus is prickly and hard to eradicate. What I relate to, but that is me. I have a tough exterior built to withstand any condition, but I have a soft, gooey inside, and that's more often seen when I'm working with others. With my awareness and the drive to remain humble, I don't fall into the trap of considering myself unique, because to my kind, uniqueness kills. It'll isolate us from others, it'll keep us from making connections and having relationships, and that isolation makes us terminally unique. I become what I think about. So for so long, I was so dark, and I was attracted to darkness. I would let that darkness rent space in my head. I didn't have dreams. I was preoccupied with how I was going to sustain my existence. I didn't have time for dreams, for hope. I had no faith, no trust. I did what I had to do to survive. My counselor at the Smith changed all that. She unlocked me. With her help, I built a support network, and she changed my thinking. The simple law of attraction. I began to dream, but good dreams. I began to see what was authentic in me. I started to believe. But when you have faith, without works is dead. So I put my boots on the ground, and my life changed. Like Bruce Lee says, be water. As water, I can slide past anything. It's why these hits don't hurt as much as they used to hurt. Everyone has setbacks, but a failure is only when we walk away. She taught me to accept my setbacks with grace, but to not concede defeat and instead work my way through it. 3 steps forward, 2 steps back. She taught me that success looks different to everyone, so don't live by other people's rules. Be a breaker of systems. I was a human being, but now I'm a human becoming. Anyone can become something else if they break off the shackles of other people's rules and expectations. So I live by my own rules, my own expectations. Do I have high expectations? No. I have my expectations. A bar I try to achieve. And if I don't make it, I don't walk away. I don't self-sabotage. I don't go into the patterns of learned helplessness that I picked up from the street. I managed to work around these obstacles. Now, I didn't lose school because I can learn everywhere in this world. If I have to sit out 5 years, I'm certainly not going to sit at home on the couch watching the clock. Like I said, boots on the ground, because I am finding ways to learn and to be of service to my community. Anyone who sees it, anyone who talks to me sees it. I spend a lot of time asking you questions about trying to learn more. The huge hole in my heart and my soul is no longer filled with that darkness, but the light of others. I'm finding new things to fill it with, like this new speaking thing I've got going on. Last October, I addressed the city at a convention on homelessness in town here, and that gave me an invite to speak at the Ontario Summit in Toronto. Pretty amazing, outstanding for me. And then from there, now I'm speaking here to you. And I can tell you, being able to do this is just as rewarding as going to school. I love being up here. I was even interviewed by a Canadian best-selling author, public speaker, and lived experience advocate, John Paul Bedard, for his book on resilience. It's a book that has a lot of famous people in it. Sprinter Ben Johnson, gold medalist Clara Hughes, and even Dr. Gabor Mate, to just name a few. But even to be asked to be interviewed for it was such a tremendous honor, and to think that he was just as curious to hear my story as he was those incredible people. It makes me feel like my terrible past has some merit now in possibly connecting and helping others get through the chaos and tragedy. I've always wanted to write a book on my journey. It's one of those dreams, right? Just random. But now, being able to count on JP as my mentor, that dream might possibly happen. You know, next stop, TED Talk. Why not? Make that a dream. Because if there's anything that I've learned throughout this whole thing is that nothing is impossible. Impossible is a word that other people use to limit my abilities. You know, like grade 10 education. People said it was impossible. I was too dumb to go back to school. Took 4 tries on the mature student test at the college, man, but I got in there. They're wrong. People said that my life experience and mental illness makes it impossible to be in the field as a social worker. Wrong again. People said that going to college and then changing your mind and then deciding you want to go to university is impossible and very stupid. You're noticing the trend, right? One door closes, another opens. But closing my mind to not see the opportunities is a thing of the past. When you can see the world in 1,000 colors, why would you choose to use just one brush? It makes no sense. When I'm on the front lines, I often play the role of peer. But today I'm humbly in front of you who are my peers. I'm grateful to be with you today because I cannot go where I need to be without someone showing me the way. So I thank you all for being the way showers that you are, for not just me, but for others that are like me. We need you. I need you. For we can do together what I cannot do alone. It's been an honor and a pleasure. Thank you, Miigwech, and I'm Groot.